What is up, ladies and gents? It's your boy Jermaine event, Main on MMA, and today we are checking out a video from JuicyMMA. Shout out to JuicyMMA. And this video is about why Dricus Du Plessis will destroy Khamzat Chimaev. Let's check it out, ladies and gents. Dricus is growing on me, and I don't know if he'll destroy Khamzat, but I'm down to hear the argument. Let's check it out, ladies and gents.
Why Dricus Du Plessis will destroy Khamzat Chimaev.
Here is the South African finisher, Dricus Du Plessis.
I'm not gonna defend my belt. I'm gonna keep on fighting like I never had that belt. And I'm willing to die and take a life for this belt. I can be sitting on you for 10 minutes, bashing your face. You know, if the ref doesn't say stop, I'm not stopping. And that's why I'm the world champion.
I'm not the same guy like everyone. My heart is different, man.
Let's go.
I don't think about anyone like it's dangerous for me.
God.
If I smash everybody, the belts will come. Nothing gonna help me.
Knockout power, great jiu-jitsu, strong wrestling.
I'm coming for everybody! Kill everybody! I'm the champ! I'm the king! Woo!
And the man is a psychopath.
Both Dricus and Khamzat are coming off impressive victories over Sean Strickland and Robert Whittaker respectively. And at this point, all indications point to a super fight between Dricus and Khamzat being next. And although a lot of people think Khamzat is not only going to beat Dricus, but he's going to run through him in the first round, in my opinion, I think the exact opposite. I think Dricus is actually not only going to be able to beat Khamzat, but I think he's going to be able to finish him. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA. I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Typically, when you talk about some of the UFC's best in terms of rising stars, top talent in divisions, or even champions, a lot of times those guys are very proficient in one area of the game. Either they're very technical strikers, they're very technical grapplers, or in occasion when you talk about the best of the best, they're very technical in both aspects. But when you talked about a guy in Dricus Du Plessis, it was pretty clear that he didn't fit in the mold of most MMA fighters, and especially most UFC fighters. As early on into his career, he had blunders in both the grappling as well as the striking. As in his fight against Trevin Giles, he famously pulled Giles on top of himself, giving Giles an advantageous position over him, as well as some mistakes he made in some other fights in the grappling. And in terms of Dricus' striking, it appeared that he was one of the more wild guys really in the entire UFC. So based upon both of those factors, in his early days in the UFC, most people assumed that Dricus wasn't necessarily all that good, and he would never really turn out to be anything crazy. But regardless of all his potential flaws, it didn't matter, as Dricus was not only winning, he was winning in impressive fashion. As in his UFC debut, he found a first round KO finish. In his second fight, he also found a second round KO finish over Trevin Giles. After that, he was able to finish Darren Till via submission, beat Brad Tavares via decision, beat Derek Brunson via KO in the second round, and even though he was able to put all those impressive wins together, finishing most of his fights, fans still weren't legitimizing who Dricus Du Plessis was, mostly based upon all the things that I mentioned before. He didn't necessarily look technical in either the striking or the grappling. But once Dricus went up against Robert Whittaker, everything changed, as Dricus was able to find a second round KO victory over Robert Whittaker. And going into that fight, everybody was on Whittaker. Whittaker was a big favorite. Essentially every fan and every fighter was picking Robert Whittaker to win. But regardless of all of that, Dricus was able to put together his...
I don't know if he's going to go into this because he kind of went over that Derek Brunson. He was able to beat Derek Brunson. I was there for that fight. Okay. He was getting ragdolled in the wrestling by Derek Brunson. I think that's important to mention. He was getting ragdolled for like 2 rounds. And then Derek Brunson just gassed out. He couldn't defend himself. He was dominating Du Plessis like the entire fight until you just saw him hit a wall. When that was happening, Brunson was like in talks to be like a challenger for the belt. He was going to fight Adesanya in a rematch. Brunson was winning that fight, and now he's coming up against a Khamzat Chimaev who's gonna grapple fuck him like crazy. I don't think the defensive wrestling is there. If you guys are just looking at his highlights and not the entire fights, you see that he has good wrestling when he takes people down. But go back and watch that Derek Brunson fight. See who's big brothering who for most of that fight. And then Brunson gasses. Check it out.
Best performance to date, and he was able to finish one of the legends of the middleweight division. After his big victory over Whitaker, his next fight was for the belt against Sean Strickland in a razor close fight, but a fight that Dricus Du Plessis did win by decision. His fight after that was against Israel Adesanya, which was also a tremendous performance by Dricus. He was able to find a submission in the 4th round, and of course, most recently, Dricus was able to beat Sean Strickland again via decision, but this time it wasn't close at all, as it was a 50-45. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, how has Dricus Du Plessis been able to be so successful thus far, especially considering that he's not the most technical guy out there? Well, in my opinion, I think it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is a misconception that he's very untechnical. Because in my opinion, although it does appear on the feet at least that Dricus is throwing wild shots out there, a lot of times in his fights, when you talk about the first Strickland fight, the second Strickland fight, the Adesanya fight, even the Whitaker fight to an extent, a lot of times when he's throwing wild shots out there, as the fight does progress, he gets closer and closer on those overhands. And really what that tells you is Dricus is making technical adjustments out there in order to get closer on his shots until he eventually is able to land. And when you talk about some of the guys that he was able to have success in the striking against, you're talking about some of the better guys in the division and some of the better guys of all time. As of course he was able to have success against Israel Adesanya, he was able to hurt him in the 4th round and of course end up submitting him right after that. He was also able to have success in both the first fight, but more so in the second fight versus Sean Strickland. And I know a lot of people underrate Strickland, but at the end of the day, his offense isn't tremendous. It's really just a jab and a teep kick. But in terms of his defense, it's one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the entire UFC. So the fact that Dricus was able to land quite a bit, especially in the second fight for Sean Strickland, obviously is an incredible feat for him. But besides just his striking ability, I think his grappling ability is the most underrated and the most overlooked part of Dricus's game. On the ground, Dricus actually is very technical. Obviously, he had a few blunders throughout his career against Trevin Giles and in a couple of other fights, but for the most part, Dricus is very technical on the ground. He does a great job at taking guys down, but once the fight's on the ground, it's very difficult for guys to get back up. He can submit you, he can land big ground and pound shots on you, and for the most part, I think Dricus is a tremendous grappler. But the next reason for why I think Dricus has been able to have so much success thus far is due to his physicality. And I know I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but guys with great physicality tend to be some of the better fighters in their division and also some of the champions we see in the UFC. And I think when you talk about a guy in Dricus Du Plessis, obviously he does have a lot of skill, and I was just talking about how I thought he had a lot more technical ability than most fans give him credit for, but at the end of the day, I think Dricus exemplifies why physicality is important probably more than anybody else. Because there's a lot of moments where Dricus makes mistakes out there, but because he's so physical, he's able to get away with it, and eventually he's able to win a lot of his fights. Because a lot of his fights that I touched upon before, he was losing in the first round or he was losing early on, but as the fight did progress, he found a way to win. Whether that meant hurt his opponent, knock out his opponent, submit his opponent as the fight progressed, he was able to do all of those things regardless of how it started for him. And I think that's a huge testament to how truly physical this guy is. But the next question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Dricus Du Plessis is going to destroy Khamzat Chimaev? Well, this comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is once again that physicality. And I think that physicality is especially going to come in handy in this fight against Khamzat. Because obviously, similarly to Dricus, Khamzat is very physical. He's an absolute menace in the first round. He's able to utilize his wrestling and find a lot of finishes, whether that means via ground and pound or whether that means via submission, Khamzat is an absolute nightmare in the first round. And even though I think Dricus is going to win this fight and even find a finish, at the end of the day, I still think he's going to lose round 1.
The more I look into it, I say
Khamzat is an
no.
extremely dangerous fighter. But the reason why I think his physicality is such a big factor is if Dricus is able to make Khamzat work a little bit harder than he's used to in the first round by maybe stopping a couple takedowns or once the fight gets...
I just feel like this argument you're overlooking. You're like, people are not thinking about how good his grappling is. No, we know how good his offensive wrestling is. We know how good his offensive wrestling, but people, unless you're a psychopath like me, you don't probably watch like every fight. You don't put yourself in financial debt to go see John Jones in Las Vegas. All right? Unless you're a psychopath. And so my point is, I watch every fight. Especially if I buy a ticket, I'm there for 8 hours. I'm there for that full card. I'm there before it starts. You know what I'm saying? I'm there for like 8 hours. I watch all the fights. You guys got to watch this dude against Derek Brunson. I'm gonna show a highlight after this video, or try to find some things, but yeah.
To the ground, stopping some submission attempts, stopping some of the things that Khamzat is trying to do in that first round, and assuming, of course, that Dricus is able to survive round 1. As the fight does progress, I think we're going to see Khamzat tire out more and more. Because obviously, in a lot of his fights, Khamzat's great in round 1, but if you're able to get out of round 1, he tires out as the rounds do progress. We especially saw that in the Kamaru-Usman fight, and I think a very similar thing could happen in this fight versus Dricus, but maybe even to a greater extent. Because as I said, if Dricus can make Khamzat work in round 2, and round 3, 4, and 5, Dricus is only going to be getting stronger and Khamzat is only going to be getting weaker. So I do think his physicality is especially huge in this fight against Khamzat Chimaev. Now the next factor I wanted to talk
I'm not hating on Dricus. I'm telling y'all, he's growing on me. I'm not hating on Dricus, but the more I'm hearing this argument, the more I think Dricus has no chance, ladies and gents.
For why I think Dricus is going to be able to beat Khamzat and possibly even finish him is due to their striking styles. Now, I will say, Khamzat actually is a better striker than people give him credit for. He does a nice job at throwing that jab, switching stances, throwing a left or right straight. But with that being said, Khamzat by far does his best work when he's on the front foot. But when you talk about a guy in Dricus Du Plessis, he puts most of his opponents on the back foot. In his last fight against Sean Strickland is a guy who's notoriously known for pressuring his opponents, and he wasn't able to pressure Dricus. And obviously in a lot of his other fights as well, Dricus is always on the front foot. And especially if Khamzat's starting to gas as the fight does progress, I think there's even a bigger chance that Dricus will be on the front foot as well. And if that were to be the case, I think he's going to start to build and land some shots on Khamzat. Whether that's the high kick, whether that's a spinning body kick, I think that could be a huge factor, especially if Khamzat's tiring out. I think leg kicks are also going to be a big factor for Dricus, and as the fight does progress, all of these things may become too much for Khamzat, and Dricus could possibly find a later finish in the fight. But with all that being said, I do...
And maybe every day could be Uncle Dunk Fest or whatever the fuck that nigga said. I'm not feeling this right now. I'm a Boars stan for the first.
You think this is going to be a very competitive fight? It is going to be very interesting to see how Khamzat does look in that first round, and if Dricus is able to make it out of the first round, how he will look after that. But with all that being said, I do think Dricus is going to be able to win, and I think there's a real chance he'll be able to find a finish as well.
All right, shout out to JuicyMMA. Let's check out some Brunson versus Du Plessis. So it's between when Dricus faces another grappler. Oh, he's taken down immediately within the first round. He's on his back. He's on his back kind of effortlessly against a capable wrestler. He's on his back, getting elbowed effortlessly. Yeah, he can wrestle. But what happens when he's up against another capable wrestler? I don't know what happens with Khamzat necessarily. if he's the nail in the wrestling situation. And see, and then he got the back. He took his back, and this is that transition here. Takes him back down to the ground. He's ragdolling your boy in the first round. I thought he was such a good wrestler. Now he's under attack. Look at this. This is who's going to beat Khamzat, who's going to dominate Khamzat. I don't know. I don't know. Look at that. Hold on. Holy shit. What just happened there? He just like melted. I'm sorry. I was just like, whoa, this guy's going to beat Khamzat? Dominate Khamzat? This is the first round. Look at this. Oh my God. This is the first round. I know he's a lot better now, but he's usually not under attack with the wrestling like he is right here. This is really the only time you've seen it against this level of grappler. And he looks like he's under attack. He's getting ragdolled. This is the first round. So shout out to JuicyMMA. Shout out to JuicyMMA for the video. But I have to disagree. I think the wrestling from Khamzat and the strength will be just way too much for Dricus Du Plessis in the first round. I see another first round finish for Khamzat Chimaev. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys once again for being here. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I will see you guys when I see you guys. I'll holla.